Vice President Harris, big story in CNN yesterday, Washington Post today about her future. Talk of running for governor of California, running for president again in 28. Can't really do both if you win the governor's race, or doing something else. I want to show you two paragraphs from the Washington Post story. 102 first, please. Both stories, I would say, were pretty bullish on Kamala Harris's prospects compared to what my sources say. Quote, she proved the skeptics wrong about her abilities as a political athlete, said Brian Fallon, a former Harris campaign spokesman. A very smart guy, Brian Fallon.
Yep.
He claims to believe that she proved her skeptics wrong. And then next paragraph, 103. Many aides and allies say that if Harris sought the presidency again, her candidacy would resemble 2024 far more than 2019. That's when she ran, lost the nomination before a vote was cast. The more centrist, confident Harris voters saw during the general election is more in line with her true self, they said. So this piece says she's not gotten very much criticism. That's true. Dan, more centrist and confident. Did you look at Kamala Harris as centrist and confident in this campaign?
I looked at her as neither of those things. I think the problem, look, for Harris, her future is murky for two reasons. One is her brand. Okay, so they're arguing that, in fact, she's truly moderate. Candidates who have run three times and been successful, Ronald Reagan, let's say Donald Trump now, have been consistent with each of those campaigns, and the country has kind of come towards them, or in Trump's instance, kind of came back towards him. But there was never this like, I was a liberal, then I was a moderate, like I ping ponged around. So she would have to attempt to kind of like, take two, stamp out 2019 and spend an entire year in town halls and other things saying why that is not really who she is. And this is really, really who she believes that she is. The second thing is, from a mechanic standpoint, she did not raise $1.5 billion. The opponent of Donald Trump raised $1.5 billion, and it happened to be her. Both the grassroots was not, hopping up and down with excitement over Kamala Harris, and nor were major donors. Like, if anything, the major donors held their nose and would leave events and shake their head and call reporters and say, my God, she's so blah, she won't answer our questions, etc. When there was no alternative other than Trump, they kept writing checks. So I don't think she would have nearly the fundraising power that she had this first time, or this second time here. And the other thing is, what is her base? What is her coalition of either voters or kind of muscle in the party that you say, okay, they're going to be behind her, and I don't know how we get around that to get to a winning formula. You could maybe argue older black women are her strength, but all the rest of the segments of the party were lukewarm at best about her. So I just don't see why anyone would fear her, certainly for president. And I even think if she runs for governor of California, she will be challenged in a primary.
Sean.
Yeah. So first, with all due respect to Brian Fallon, the only way she's a strong political athlete is if billiards is a sport. Secondly, I've seen plenty of people do both. She could easily drive Uber and Lyft. I've been working on that all weekend. Look, I don't think that there's anybody that walked away impressed with her campaign internally. And if
let me stop and ask you a question about that. Okay. The three of us, I think it's incumbent upon us to think anew and to be open to the notion that maybe we're too harsh in our appraisal, even though it's the appraisal of nearly everyone I know. How is it that CNN and the Washington Post write stories that say she's largely escaped responsibility, she's got in late, there was all the environment? Like, why are those news organizations still contributing to the mythology that she was a good candidate? I'm serious. Do you guys have any idea? Like, why would they do that?
It's funny. I read Cleve Woodson. Is that it? Cleve Woodson's story in the Post. And it's
Well, he didn't write the Kamala story.
Okay.
Kamala story, I think he wrote something else. The Kamala, he wrote like a Biden story, I think.
Right.
The Kamala
Okay.
story was written by Maeve Reston and Ashley Parker.
I mean, I think part of it is
But
that these guys,
what's in it? What's in it for a report? I'm asking
the only
seriously.
thing
What's
is
in
that
it for the?
they have to admit they were wrong, right? So the reporters that bought into it, the Ashley Parkers and everyone else from the Washington Post, the New York Times, at some point they have to say, I was wrong. I touted her prowess. I said their campaign ground game was excellent. I said that Trump sucked. And so to write a story that says she was bad is in direct contradiction to what I wrote earlier this campaign. And I think that it's a hard hill to climb if you're one of them.
I also just think that there's a feeling in the party that like we're in the wilderness, we got our butts kicked, and like Trump's dominating right now, and then we'll kind of deal with the future in the new year. And nobody kind of wants to pile on her. And even the Biden criticism, I think, is actually fairly soft right now. I think, though, that in about 3 or 4 months, those who are thinking of 2028, if she's still circling around, the knives will come out. And I think you will see stories that are, handed to news organizations where people will go on background, if not on the record, and they will start systematically trying to take her down. And I think so right now, if you're a reporter, you got to get people to be willing to either go on the record or enough people on background to trash her. And I just get the sense nobody wants to do that. They just don't have the stomach to do it right now.
Why do I hear from so many people
Oh, so do
think,
I.
well, I know, but I mean, why can't these reporters find those people? Not to gratuitously trash her, but I mean, these stories are so unrepresentative of what I believe the reality is of how she's perceived by donors. And so, for instance, Dan, you said if she runs for governor, she'll be challenged. Those stories basically say the field will be cleared for her.
Totally. No, I think I look, I hear from a lot of people, including folks on that campaign, who, I've talked about this before. I took a lot of heat the last year, who have now said, yeah, you were right. And,
But I just find it confusing that people would spend the time to write a big story about whether Kamala Harris and just have the stuff in it that just I don't know. I find it confusing. All
well, and
right.
I can also say, look, we mock a little bit of like, she's doing lots of meetings and private events and nothing is public. She is holding a ton of private meetings and celebrate and thank you events almost daily here. And I know people who have been there and have talked to her, and she makes remarks at these events, and she hangs around the rope line with Doug Emhoff, and they talk for a while. And she's definitely saying like, I'm trying to figure out what to do, and
Yeah.
but she still speaks in platitudes and still speaks in just this kind of hopey, aspirational, and a lot of these, not a lot, some of these people leave just shaking their heads still.